Hello and welcome to the next edition of the BriefingsDirect Voice of Innovation podcast series. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host and moderator for this timely discussion on 9 steps IT organizations can take amid the COVID-19 pandemic to attain a new normal. As enterprises develop an IT response to the novel coronavirus crisis, they face both immediate and longer-term crisis management challenges. There are many benefits to simultaneously steadying the business amid unprecedented disruption and readying the company to succeed in a changed world. Stay with us now as we examine a Hewlett-Packard Enterprise Pointnext Services 9-step plan designed to navigate the immediate crisis and, in parallel, plan for your organization's future. Here to share the Pointnext plan and its positive impacts on your business's ongoing health are Rohit Dixit, Senior Vice President and General Manager, Worldwide Advisory and Professional Services at HPE Pointnext Services. Welcome, Rohit.
Hey, thank you, Dana. Good to be here.
We're also here with Craig Partridge, Senior Director, Worldwide Advisory and Transformation Practice, HPE Pointnext Services. Welcome, Craig.
Hi, Dana. Nice to be on the call with you.
We're delighted to have you with us. Rohit, let's start with you. As you were crafting your 9-step model, what was the inspiration? How did this come about?
Yeah. So, Dana, what we've been working on, obviously, is engaging with our customers as the new situation was evolving. A lot of conversations about how they should react, and then we saw a lot of different customers and clients of ours, engaging in very different ways, and some showed some best practices, but not others. And as we observed these conversations, as we observed how people were reacting, and compared that to our experience, obviously managing large IT organizations, working with many customers in the past, we sort of put all of those learnings together, collated them into this 9-step model that we were talking about. So really, it comes a little bit out of our past experience, a lot of input and conversations with the customers, and then structuring all of that into a set of best practices.
And of course, at Pointnext Services, you're quite used to managing risk, thinking about security incident management, for example. How is this different? Is this the same old management of risk, or is this a different type of risk?
Oh, it's a very different kind of risk, for sure, yeah. Because it's hitting you from so many different directions. Usually the risk is either, a cyber threat, for example, or a discontinuity, or some kind of disruption that you're dealing with. This one is coming at us from many, many different directions at the same time. To layer it on top of that is now some of the customers are seeing actual cybersecurity issues pop up and cyber attacks actually increase. So yeah, it's affecting everybody from end users all the way to the core of the business to the supply chain. So definitely multidimensional.
And because you're in this sort of unique position where you're working with so many different clients, you can observe what's working and what's not working and then apply that back rather quickly. How is that working? Are you able to turn around very rapidly from what you're learning in the field and then apply that to these steps that you're disseminating?
Yeah, what we found is that using the 9 steps as a guideline, what we've really done is focused very immediately with the customer on what we call the triage step, right? To understand what is the most important thing that we should be doing right now for the safety of our employees, of their employees. How can we contribute to the community? How can we keep the most essential business operations running? So that's been sort of the primary area of focus. But now what we're seeing is the customers, as that triage step sort of stabilizes a little bit, what we're seeing now is the customers starting to think a little bit more, if not long-term, at least medium-term, right? What does this lead to? What are the next steps? And those are the two varying conversations that we're having with our customers and within ourselves as well, because, obviously we are as impacted as everybody else is. And then just working through those in a step-by-step manner, which is the basis of the 9 steps to the new normal model.
Now, Craig, I have to imagine that as these enterprises and IT departments are grappling with the momentary crisis, that they might tend to lose the long view, that they might just focus and be very myopic. How do you help them look at both the big picture and the long term, as well as the minute focus on today's issues?
Yeah, and I wanted to pick up on something that Rohit just alluded to there, the how we've never seen this kind of disruption before, and you kind of asked it in your question, why is this different? Although I think a lot of the response is learnt in HPE from helping customers manage things like their security posture and cyber threats, you have to understand that for most customers, that's an issue for their organization alone. It's their ability to maintain a security posture, and what's vulnerable in that conversation and the risks that they're mitigating for are the impact that is directly associated with their organization. What we've never seen before is really the global economy being put on pause. So it's not just the effect of how an individual organization continues to be able to transact, protect revenue, protect core services, continue to be able to be viable, but it's all of their ecosystem. It's their entire supply chain. It's the global economy that's being put on hold here. And I think that's what, when Rohit talks to these different dimensions, this is absolutely different, right? So we might have learnt methods, we might have pragmatic ways to get through the forest fire of now and ways to think about the future. But this is on a completely different scale. And I think that's the kind of challenge that customers are having to face right now. And that's where we're trying to help them out.
All right. Now, Rohit, you've taken your 9 steps and you've put them into 2 buckets, I suppose, a 2-mode approach. Why is that required? Why was that the right way to go?
Yeah, and just to sort of describe the model a little bit, it consists of those 9 steps as we talked about, and it's got the two modes. The first one being the immediate crisis management, and then the second one is bridging to the new normal. In the first step, the immediate crisis management is where you do that triage that we were talking about. You adjust your operations to the most critical, sort of call it life-sustaining kind of activities. Then when you're in that mode, you stabilize that mode a little bit. And then finally, you sustain that mode on an ongoing basis, because I think we will be living in that mode. And then the second mode is the bridge to the new normal. And here, basically, what we're doing is we're starting to, as we're triaging and adjusting, etc. And in parallel, you're trying to observe what's happening in the world around you. You start to align to a point of view with the business within IT as to what we're seeing, what it means. And using that observation and that alignment to then design a point of view about the future, about the business, where it's going, and how IT should be supporting the direction that the new business is. Then obviously is the transformation to that end state, and then optimizing that end state, and then honestly, in many ways, preparing for whatever the next shock that is going to come, because at some point there will be another disruption down the horizon. So that's how we divided it up in that model. The 2 modes are critical for a couple of reasons. The first one is that you can't be taking a very long-term approach while a crisis is unfolding. You need to keep your employees safe. You need the most critical functions going, etc. And that's sort of the priority number 1 of the day. And what we find is in that the governance that you put around it, the processes that you put there, the teams that you put there, they have to behave very, very differently. And they are focused on the here and the now. And in parallel, though, you can't live in crisis mode forever. You have to start thinking about, how do I get to the new normal? And if you wait for the crisis to completely pass before you do that, you will miss sort of the learnings that come out of this, the speed and expediency you need to get to the new normal and to adapt to the world that changes. So that's why what we've done in that approach is to talk about a 2-mode approach, which deals with the here and the now, but at the same time prepares you for the mid to the long term as well.
Now, Craig, oftentimes when you're in the heat of the firefighting moment, you sometimes lose track of governance and management and planning, the architecture and the methodologies. How are your clients dealing with keeping this managed, even though you're in a intense moment? And how does that relate to what we refer to as minimum viable operations? How do we keep it minimum viable and governed at the same time?
Yeah, I think that's a really key point, isn't it? That we're trained as a technology-driven operating model to be very secure and safe and predictable, and we manage change very carefully. And even when we're doing things at extreme pace, we're doing it in a very predictable way. What this 9-step model, I think, introduces is that actually when you start running to the fire of immediate crisis management, you really want to go in low with the governance model, because you need extreme speed in your response. So you need those small teams that can act almost autonomously, at least with a very light governance model, to be able to go and run to those particular fires, make some very quick decisions. I think one of the points that I'd like to highlight, just listening to Rohit there, was you're going to make wrong decisions in some of those, and actually that's okay, because speed trumps perfection in this particular mode. But it doesn't take away from that second team coming on stream, starting to look at that longer term. And that's kind of the more traditional cadence of what we do, technologists and a strategist looking forward. It's just the future landscape you're looking at is a radically different one. And so ideas that might have been on hold or may not have been kind of core to the value proposition before suddenly spring up as ideas that you can start to imagine your future being based around. So I think those things are really key in the model, this idea of kind of two modes and two speeds. And don't think about getting it right now. Just it's about protecting that core, protecting those critical systems and being able to continue to transact. But in the future, start looking at some of those opportunities that may not have been available to you in the past.
And how about at the same time, Craig, being able to maintain a culture of innovation and creativity? A lot of times we've seen in the past during crises that some of the great inventions of technology and science can be brought to bear, that people, when pressed in a moment of need, actually dig down deep in their minds and come up with some very creative and new thinking. How do we foster that level of innovation while also maintaining governance and the ability to react quickly?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. We, as an industry, as individuals, we're typically very creative. Certainly, technologists are very creative people. The application of technology to all sorts of different use cases and business outcomes that customers are looking to try and drive. That creativity, I don't think goes away. And I love the phrase that necessity is the mother of all innovation or invention. That the idea that even in a crisis, those are probably the moments when your most innovative, your most creative people are really going to come to the fore. Guess what? In many customers, many of the ideas on how to respond, not just tactically, but strategically to these kind of big disruptive moments in time, those ideas might already be there. They might already be on the table. People already in the organization with the notion of how to create value in that new normal. There's never, these moments kind of bring those people to the surface, don't they? They sort of make champions out of those innovators, and maybe they didn't have the right moment in time or the right space to be that creative in the past. Or maybe it's a permission thing for many customers. They just didn't have the permission. I think what's key to these kind of big disruptive events is create the environment where innovation is fostered, where those people that may have had those ideas in the past, but thought, well, that'll never work. It's not core to the business model. It's not core to driving innovation and productivity. Create the environment where there are no sacred cows. Give them the space to come to the fore with those ideas. Create those kind of new governance models.
I would actually say that, this is a great opportunity, right? Discontinuities in how we work create great sort of cracks through which big innovations can be driven. The phrase I like to use is never waste a crisis, because crisis creates those discontinuities and the opportunities that we talked about. I would say that it's a mindset thing, right? If we go through this crisis playing defense, right, just trying to maintain what we already have, tweak it a little bit, I think that would be very unfortunate. Because this is back to the point about Craig's sacred. We had a conversation with a customer who was talking about their hybrid IT mix, what apps and what workloads should run where. And they had sort of reached this uneasy alliance between risk and innovation, and their mix actually settled at a certain point of public, private, on-prem, consumption-based, etc. And now what they're finding is, because the environment has changed so much, that they can revisit that mix from scratch. They've learned new things and they want to bring more things on-prem, or they've learned something new and they've decided to place some data on, new IoT models, new AI models. So to me, really the point is that we shouldn't just approach this in a defensive mode. We should approach it in that innovative mode, in that great opportunity being presented to us mode, because that's exactly what.
And getting back to how this came about, the 9 steps, Rohit, were you thinking of a specific industry or segment, or were you thinking a public sector, private sector, or do these 9 steps apply to everybody?
Yeah, that's a great question there. So, when we drew the 9-step model, we drew from multiple industries when we were drawing it. But I think the model is very applicable across all industries. And in fact, I would say across all segments as well, right? Large enterprise and SMBs and so on as well. Now, the way it would get applied might be slightly different, right? Because enterprise, their focus is more on the transaction, the monetary, and keeping revenue streams going. In addition to, of course, the the safety of their employees and communities. But the public sector, they approach it very differently. Right? They've got these national priorities. Citizen welfare is much more important, and so on. By the way, availability of cash, for example, might be different based on SMB versus enterprise versus public sector. So the applicability is across all, is just the way you would apply these, how you would bridge to the new normal, what you would prioritize in the triage mode. I think the answer might be different for each industry or segment, but the applicability, I think, is very broad.
I just want to add a little bit to the comments that Rohit made about the kind of universal applicability of the 9-step model. Completely agree. Put it in context as well. For many industries, while cash is going to be a big constraint right now, and just surviving through the next few months to continue to transact and continue to exchange value is going to be the hard yards. There are some industries where at the moment this is probably going to get some significant investment, right? Because you think about areas like certainly public sector, education, healthcare, areas where critical national infrastructure is being stressed here, like the telcos providing communication services, because now everybody's relying on that much more. There are some industries where not just that the 9-step model is universally applicable, but let's all assume that suddenly, all of a sudden, every customer that we talk to or that is trying to deal with this is kind of staring down a barrel of no ability to invest. Some industries are absolutely going to have the ability to invest because suddenly what they do is now priority number one. Not just to sustain citizen welfare and health services, but to allow us to continue to communicate and collaborate across these great distances that we now work at. So I think it's universally applicable, and I think there's a story in each of the sectors which is probably a little bit different than others, which we should consider.
And Craig, you mentioned earlier that mistakes will be made and that it's okay and it's part of the process when you're dealing in a crisis management environment. But what can you do in order to quickly rectify? Are there ways of measuring, doing triage? How do we use measurement, quantifying, qualifying in order to get back on track as soon as possible?
Yeah, it's a really good question, Dana, about how we prioritize some of the triage and adjust steps that are in the early phases of that crisis management phase of the model. And there's a number of things that I think have emerged which are, again, kind of universally applicable in those moments. And it starts, of course, with the safety of your people, right? And by your people, not just your employees, of course, your customers, the people that you interact with your government sector, the citizens that you look after, their welfare. Everything, and certainly from inside HPE, everything has been geared around safety of the people and the welfare of the people. And we must protect that. So that's got to be kind of almost number one in the how do you prioritize. The second area is, you talked a little bit before about minimum viable operating model. So it's about aligning the decisions you make in order to sustain that capability to continue to be productive in whichever way you can. And so you're focusing on things that create immediate revenue or immediate revenue generating operations. Anything that goes into continuing to get cash into the organization and to continue to drive revenue is going to be really key. Keep that high on the priority list. A third area would be around contractual commitments. So, despite all of the global pandemic creating a kind of pause moment on many economies around the world, there's still going to be contractual commitments in play. And so you want to be making sure that your minimum viable operating model is allowing you to make good on those commitments that you have with your customers. Just let me add a couple of more things, because I think they're really top of the priority list in terms of how you make these decisions at the triage stage. Think about your organization's security posture. That's clearly going to feature heavily on how you make these priority decisions. Clearly, you've got a distributed workforce now. You've got a completely different remote connectivity model, and that's going to open up to all sorts of vulnerabilities that you need to consider. Anything that's around critical customer support, Dana. So anything that enables you to be able to continue to support your customer in the way that you would like to be supported yourself, and reaching out to that customer and making sure they're well, they're safe, they're coping. What is it you can do to step into the space to help them through that crisis as well? I think that's key. And then, the obvious one, I guess, that I'll just conclude with on this prioritization is those core services, the core transactional services which enable organizations to breathe, what we might describe as the oxygen apps, right? The ERP systems of the world, the finance systems, the things that allow cash to flow in and out and transactions to be made and orders to be to be fulfilled. Those kind of core systems you need to protect really hard in these kind of moments. So that would be my kind of list of priorities.
Rohit, it seems that critical customer support services is also top in terms of thought process and requirements. I know from my personal experience that it's frustrating when I go to work with a supplier and find that they're no longer taking phone calls or that there's a long waiting list. How are you helping your organizations factor the customer support? And I imagine you have to do it yourself for your own organization.
Yeah, absolutely. The first one is the one that you alluded to, right, is the communications channels. How do we make sure that people can communicate, can collaborate, even through, even though they are remote? How can we offer those help in those kind of things? Remote desktop services, for example, become extremely critical. Things like shared secure storage is very critical so that people can exchange information and share the data. And then wrapping around all of that, remote connectivity, collaboration, storage, etc., is a security angle that you make sure that that you're doing all that in a protected, secure manner. So those are the kind of things that we're very much focused on, not just for ourselves and within the company, but also for our customers. And what we're finding out is that we're different. To your point earlier, different industries or different segments might be at different levels of maturity in terms of their current adoption of any of these services. So we're finding that we're intersecting the customers at different points of their maturity and then moving them up that maturity stack.
And Rohit, how should teams organize themselves around these 9 steps? We've talked a little bit about process and technology, but of course, is that people side of the equation. What are you advising around team organization in order to follow these 9 steps and be able to do both the near-term crisis management and that longer-term preparing for the new normal?
Dana, what you're touching on there is probably for me one of the most fascinating aspects of this 2-mode model. Because in that triage mode, right, and we sort of borrowed a lot of our thinking from the way hospitals do triage and so on. What you need in that triage mode and in that quick, immediate reaction is you need small teams. You need small teams that can work really at speed with very autonomous decision making, right? And what you don't want to overlay initially is you don't want to overlay some kind of very prescriptive governance model on top of that. The quick reaction through the fog of war or whatever you want to call it, right? It's extremely critical in that stage. So what you want to do is you want to set up small autonomous teams that function independently, make decisions independently, and you need to keep a light touch governance model that feeds in broader directions, shares information, captures learnings, and so on. But at that point, you just want that very flexible. Now, the fascinating aspect of this is that, but as you sort of bridge to the new normal, as you start to get to thinking about the mid to the longer term, the mode of operation becomes very different. You need somebody who's collecting all the information. You need somebody who's able to coordinate across business, across IT, the different functions, partners, etc., and of course the customers, and have a point and start to create a point of view about what the future holds. What do we think the future mode of operations is going to look like from a business perspective? Translate that into IT needs and create a transformation plan, start to execute on that transformation plan, which is not the skirmish approach that you're taking in the immediate crisis management. You're taking a much more evolved transformation approach that you're going to step toward. And what we find is the mode of operations are very different. In fact, we advocate that you put 2 different teams on it. Right? You can't have the crisis management also involved in long-term planning and vice versa. Right? It's too much to handle, and it's very conflicting in the way it's approached. So we suggest that you have 2 different approaches, 2 different governance models, 2 different teams that at some point in the future will come together. But initially, that's how we suggest that you approach.
Craig, it seems to me that while you're putting these small teams to work, that you might be able to start seeing leadership qualities in people that maybe you didn't have an opportunity to see before. Is this an opportunity for individuals to step up and for managers to start really looking for the type of leadership qualities in this cauldron of crisis that will be of great value later?
I just think that's a fantastic observation in the question itself, because never more do you see leadership qualities on display than when people are in real pressurized systems where moments of decision-making need to be made rapidly, where they have to have the confidence to acknowledge that sometimes those decisions won't be wrong. The kind of leadership qualities that you're going to see exhibited through this 9-step model are exactly the kind of leadership qualities that are going to give you that shortlist of potentially standout next leaders for the organization. I think with any of these kind of moments of crisis management and long-term planning, those that step forward and take on that burden and start to lead the organization through the thinking and the process and the strategy and the vision are going to be that pool of next talent. So nurture them through this process, because they could lead you well into the future.
I suppose this is also a time where we can look for technologies that are innovative and work in a pinch to be elevated in priority. And I think we're accelerating perhaps adoption patterns in this crisis mode. So what about the technology, Craig? Are we starting to see more use of cloud first, of SaaS models, of multi-cloud and hybrid IT? How are the various models of IT that are available to us perhaps manifesting themselves in terms of being applicable now, whereas we may have taken a longer trail to get to them just 3 months ago?
Again, great avenue to go down, because I think this global pandemic is maybe the first one that's really going to showcase why technology has become such an integral part of how customers both build and deliver and create their value proposition. First, most immediate area where technology has come into play is just think about how that massively distributed workforce, which is now all working from home, how was that possible 10 years ago? How was it possible for an organization that's 50,000 employees to suddenly have 70, 80% of that workforce now communicating and collaborating online, using virtual sessions? So the technology that underpins all of that kind of remote experience has absolutely come to the fore. And then there's some technologies which you may not see, which are absolutely critical to how as a society we respond to this. Think about all of the data modeling and the number crunching that is going on in these high-performance compute platforms, which are out there actively searching for the cure and the remedy to the crisis that we find ourselves in. You mentioned as-a-service models. Absolutely, the ability to instantly consume and to match what you pay for what you use has two benefits. Not only does it keep the costs aligned, which is a thread that people are really going to focus on now, but it might ease some of that economic pressure, because as we know, in those kind of models, technology is consumed not as an upfront capital asset, but is something that is deferred over the use of its life. And so again, that takes some easing out of the economic stresses that customers are going to have. So again, if we hadn't been through the cloud era, if we hadn't been through pivoting technology to being consumed as a service, I don't think we'd be in a position where we could respond as well in this particular time.
Just to underline a point that Craig made about technology, of course, being important, but to me, what's also very important is the mode of consumption of technology is going to be very severely impacted. I think more and more customers are going to look for more flexible models, and that's going to show up in the way they think about their hybrid IT model. What is the right mix of that hybrid IT? I think these as-a-service models or consumption-based models where you pay for what you consume, no more, no less, and it allows you to flex up or down. I think that flexibility is going to drive a lot of the technology choices going forward.
All right. As we are looking from that transition to the new normal, and we recognize we have to be thinking strategically as well as tactically at all times, do you have any reassurance that you can provide, Rohit, to people as they endeavor to get to that new normal? Crisis management and strategic planning going hand in hand sounds like a great challenge. Are you seeing success? Are you seeing early signs that people are getting this and that it will be something that will put them in a stronger position having gone through this crisis?
For me, one of the best things I've seen in sort of my interactions with customers, et cetera, and especially even at HPE, one is just the level of care and support that the companies are giving their employees. I think it's amazing. I think just as a society and as a community, I think I'm really heartened by how positive the reactions have been and how well the companies are supporting their employees. That's just point one. I know that has nothing to do with technology, but I think technology does play a part in that, in enabling that. The point I would go back to is to never waste a crisis, right? The discontinuities we talked about, the great opportunities that this creates. I think if we approach this with the right mindset, and I see a lot of companies actually doing that, approaching just this from an opportunity perspective instead of just playing defense. And I think that's really good to see. And the reason why I think that this is exactly the right time for that is if somebody is looking for opportunities and if somebody is looking to design for the future, there is more technology, more consumption methods, more different means of approaching a problem than have ever existed before. You've got private cloud, you've got public cloud, you've got consumption models, on-prem, off-prem, you've got colo options, you've got IoT, you've got AI, containerization. Just there's so much innovation out there and so many ways of doing things differently that if one were to take that opportunity-based approach, I really think that this is going to be sort of very, very disruptive and could be the making of a lot of great innovation that's going to serve us.
All right, Craig, similar question. What is encouraging you to see the light at the end of the tunnel based on the work that you're doing with clients right now? What's encouraging you that this is going to be, in fact, in some ways, a path to new levels of innovation and creativity?
Yeah, again, from my perspective, the last few years, I've been spending most of my time working with customers through their digital transformation agendas. And a big focus in there has been over the last few years is pivot towards better experiences, right? Better customer engagement, better citizen engagement. And a lot of that is enabled through digital engagement models, which are underpinned by technology and driven by software. I think what we're seeing now is the kind of the proof positive that those investments over the last few years were exactly the right investments to make, because those companies now have the ability to reach out very quickly, very rapidly. They can start to enable new features, new functions, new services, new capabilities through those software delivered experiences. And so for me, what's heartwarming to see is not just how we've embraced technology in our daily lives, but those customers that went in early with a customer experience focused, technology enabled edge to cloud outcome. Those are the ones that are really, I think, being able to dance very quickly around this axis that we described in the 9-step model.
Well, we've been able to look at a lot of the implications from this 9-step program, and there's a lot more detail to the program itself and some great visual graphics, and those are available at enterprise.next, so that's enterprise.nxt, the article about the 9-step process to dealing with the current crisis and setting yourself up for a new future. Where else can people go, either Craig or Rohit, to learn more about how to approach this as a partnership, looking to create a team effect, not just going at it alone as you're an IT organization? Where else can people learn about how to deal with the current situation and try to come out in the best shape they can?
So there's lots of great resources that customers and partners can reach out to with HPE. Specifically, of course, hpe.com. There's a specific page and area that we maintain very regularly around our COVID response. There's some great resources available to our customers and partners there. A lot of the capabilities that underpin some of the technology conversations we've been having here are enabled through our Pointnext services organization. So again, visit hpe.com/services to be able to get access to some of the resources there. And just pick up the phone and speak to your HPE counterparts, because they're there to help you. They're there to support you. And nothing more is important to HPE at the moment than being there for our partners and customers at this particular time.
And I'd also like to add that we're going to be doing more podcasts and discussions on dealing with the 9-step program, as well as crisis management and long-term digital transformation here at BriefingsDirect Podcast. So look for more content there. And I'm afraid we're going to have to leave our discussion at this point. We've been examining 9 steps IT organizations can take amid the COVID-19 pandemic to attain a new normal. And we've learned about the many benefits of simultaneously steadying the business amid unprecedented disruption and steadying and readying your company to succeed in a changed world. So please join me now in thanking our guests. We've been here with Rohit Dixit. He's Senior Vice President and General Manager, Worldwide Advisory and Professional Services, HPE Pointnext Services. Thank you so much, Rohit.
Thank you very much, Dana. And please be safe and stay healthy.
Thank you. And we've also been joined by Craig Partridge, Senior Director, Worldwide Advisory and Transformation Practice, HPE Pointnext Services. Thank you, Craig.
It was an absolute pleasure, and look forward to talking to you again in the near future.
And a big thank you as well to our audience for joining us for this sponsored BriefingsDirect Voice of Innovation discussion. I'm Dana Gardner, Principal Analyst at Inter Arbor Solutions, your host for this ongoing series of Hewlett-Packard Enterprise supported discussions. Thanks again for listening. Please pass this along to your IT community and do come back next time.